You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. It's that time of year to welcome Ruth Roper Wylde back to Mysteries and Monsters to share some brand new spooky stories for us all. These stories will all feature in her upcoming These Haunted Times Volume 6, which is another wonderful collection of stories and experiences for us all to enjoy. Ruth and I cover several stories that include some haunted hospitals and some strange experiences. But before that, of course, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content, and more. And you can also click the link in the show notes. Thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support. And thank you to Lisa, my latest patron. Welcome to the team. Mysteries and Monsters can be found across most social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for news and episodes, and our exclusive merchandise site is available via TeePublic, and you will find the link to go there in the show notes too. Our intro and outro music are performed by the marvellous Weary Pines. Thank you as always to Dean Bestall for his wonderful artwork, and the show is produced by Mr. Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys. So before we join Ruth, Luke, I hope you're listening. My sincere apologies. I hope you enjoyed your evening at Celluloid Screams at the showroom here in Sheffield. It was lovely to see you and your partner there again. And I hope I'll see you again soon for another beer, perhaps. So let's head out on the hunt for some new ghost stories in the company of Ruth Roper Wylde. It's that special time of year again, and for the 5th year in a row, I'm delighted to welcome back to celebrate Halloween our good friend Ruth Roper Wylde, and with a new book, another edition of Haunted Times Volume 6 hitting the shelves. Let's see what chills Ruth has that await us. Ruth, welcome!
Thank you so much. And stop counting the years. You're making me sound old.
Well, I was just about to say it's quite funny. This is your 12th appearance on the show now.
Holy moly!
And it is also the 5th anniversary of your almost first appearance, which was episode 91. All those years ago, October 2020.
Oh my word!
I know, 5 years has flown.
But hasn't it just? You thought you'd do the podcast for a short time, and I thought I'd write 1 or 2 books.
Yes.
And we just don't be able to stop.
Yeah, and here we are. Here we are.
And here we are. Book number 10, and how many podcasts?
At the moment I'm up to 368.
Well, living well done, I say.
Absolutely. Pats on the back for both of us, Ruth. Pats on the back for both of us. So yeah, I mean, you're in esteemed company. You're into double figures with us now. But it is funny now when I look at it, because obviously this is going out Halloween 2025. We did one last year. 2023, 2022, 2021, and obviously your first appearance was just October 2020, before this kind of became an unofficial Halloween tradition, Ruth.
Yes, before I became the Halloween queen.
And long may you reign. Long may you reign. But obviously you've had a bit of a strange 12 months in regards to the fact that the last book took you over to America with that collection, which went down a storm, and no doubt has ended up creating even more stories from America for you to chase down for us, Ruth, on top of your first ever audiobook coming out as well.
My first audiobook came out a couple of months back, and that's the amazing Brennan Storr is narrating it. His voice is just so perfect for ghost stories, so I'm really proud of that collaboration. And that's available in all good places to buy audiobooks. And it's a really nice way to listen to my book, because it gives you a chance to sort of crack on with the housework, or if you're going on a long drive or whatever. But we're going to work our way through the back catalogue as well, slowly but surely. So watch this space. There'll be more coming out.
Absolutely. Well, Brennan will have his work cut out keeping up with your prolific output these days, Ruth, and it's only going to get better for all of us readers who love your work.
It's going to get even more prolific because for anybody who doesn't know, I'm about to retire fully from my day job in the civil service. So 40 years there. Last few years have been part-time, but I'm giving that up completely. So that will be more days a week to write books in. Yay!
Watch out, Europe.
Absolutely.
So, as I said in the introduction, Ruth, this is going to be Haunted Times Volume 6. Are you surprised when you look back sometimes at the popularity of your work that you've got to this? I know we joke about where we've come from and where we are, but sometimes you must take a step back and think, how on earth has this happened to me?
Do you know, it never, ever ceases to completely amaze me. Because when I started on this journey, you probably remember me saying on, earlier podcasts, what have you with you, I had been creating this database of, the various iterations of my databases since I was late teens and worked in a library and was just interested in the paranormal and was just doing it for myself. And I collated those databases for, 30 odd years before I took partial retirement and decided to write the first book. So I genuinely, at that point in time, thought I would empty all the stories out of my database onto paper, as it were, publish them, and that would be that. Yay! All done. Achieved my goal, wrote the book, hang that hat up sort of thing. And it just never occurred to me that once I started trying to get the correlations, which is what's always fascinated me, is correlations between people having experiences in the same place or same general area. And as soon as I started on that part of the research, it just never occurred to me that people would then, of course, start writing in the way they do, which is just fabulous. And then, of course, I've been on your show so many times, been on a few other shows, radio shows, etc. People get to hear what I'm doing and they write into me. And all the accounts go onto my databases. And then I start researching them. And then I go out asking if anybody's seen anything in that area. And it's literally like painting the fourth bridge. I know I've said that before, but it really is. It's as fast as I empty one database, the other one is busy filling up in the background. So even whilst writing this book, these Haunted Times 6, my roadmap of British Ghosts database is filling up, and so is my American database. Because, of course, people are reading the American book at the moment or listening to it on audiobook, and they're thinking, oh, I could write into Ruth with my story. So into the American database it goes. And I think I'm just going to end up needing about 6 pairs of hands at this rate. But I'm not complaining because honestly, it just keeps me endlessly fascinated talking to people. And I've even got another witness interview this week that might manage to sneak into this book at the very last minute before it gets published. So yeah, it's just fabulous. And of course, it's funny because it goes a bit cyclical almost. I publish a book and I get a rush of people writing to me because they've just picked up the new book. Then I start working on the next book and I start going out on social media asking people, and I get dozens and dozens going on at once because I've got loads of posts out at once. And once I get to the point where I've kind of framed the book I'm working on currently, it all quietens down for a little while because I haven't put a post out on social media asking for a little while I'm busy writing. So then I just get a sort of slow, steady trickle of stories. And then I'll publish this and the whole thing starts to ramp up again. And it's just like this cycle that goes on and on. But it's beginning to be interesting because it's beginning to show some sort of correlations in a broad sense over the paranormal itself, which is kind of what I wanted to do in the first place. Put the data down for people to make conclusions about what exactly is the paranormal.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where it's going. So, whoo.
I suppose that's the key thing, isn't it? Because the more data you get, the more results you get. And I suppose one of the things about this particular subject is often it's quite sporadic, or you will always get books that are focused on a particular area or a particular location, perhaps, Ruth. Whereas one of the things about your body of work is that it's from all over the place. You will get stories from Cornwall all the way up to Inverness, from Llandudno down to Norwich, and everywhere in between. And so, whereas before you would have very regional versions and very regional ghost stories, or perhaps the retellings of the old ones that we've all read 100 times, or the certain counties with their made-up histories of ghosts. Once again, not pointing any fingers towards Norfolk. But I suppose that's the thing with the way that you've set out on this path, is the fact that you've not tethered yourself to a particular location other than, yeah, fair enough, you're covering the UK rather than the rest of the world. Or even though, as I mentioned, you've had a little detour across the Atlantic for us last year. And therefore, I suspect that because you've got such a wide palette of experiences coming from all over, it gives you a better insight into any potential correlation.
Well, it is really interesting because I have got a couple of South African stories, a couple of German stories, and one, I can't remember now whether it's Sweden or Norway, got that way somewhere. But yes, so I've got a whole load of American ones, and of course the UK ones, and I cover Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England. And I suppose in some ways it would be easier if I concentrated on one small location, because you could really get underneath it and go and visit and talk to lots of people. And of course, I can't do that when I'm covering such a wide variety. But by the same token, I hate kind of limiting myself. So I'm one of those people that if I start delving into a story, I'll go off on all sorts of tangents and fall down all sorts of rabbit holes. And then somebody will write and say, oh, I don't know about a ghost in that pub, but did you know the pub 5 miles down the road has got one? And off I go 5 miles down the road and so on. Whereas if I was limiting to one town or even one county or whatever, I would have to stop every time it went outside that boundaries. And I'm not good at stopping.
Yes.
They'll put that on my gravestone, aren't they? She was not good at stopping.
But I suppose it's our benefit, Ruth, that you can't stop. And this is the thing, because I consider myself quite well travelled in the United Kingdom. I've been to I've been to every county in England apart from Cornwall now. That's the last one on my hit list. And I've travelled around Scotland. I've been to Ireland. I've been all up and down Wales. Northern Ireland has yet to suffer a visit from myself, but I am hoping to get there eventually at some point. And so for me, I love being able to find out things about places that I may have spent some time in or passed through or know somebody from, because it just gives a richer insight into certain places. Because especially when you live up north, the places like I was at the Strange Days Festival the other week, Ruth, that's a part of the country I barely visited, and so it was exciting for me to be there. Primarily, yes, it's great to be at an event, but it's also culturally enriching for me because I've never been to that particular place. I had no idea where Pusey was till I was asked to appear. And so from that point, you suddenly realise, well, yeah, it's an area steeped in magic and myth. You can tell that by the very people who were there and the location, the venue, the pub next door to where we were. All the insides were painted with crop circles and on the ceilings, and the lampshades were UFOs and flying saucers, and there was aliens dotted about everywhere. So it was clearly a very interesting place. I mean, they've even got a crop circle museum down the road, which I was not even aware we had one in this country.
Neither was I.
But apparently it's near Pusey. So it's one of those places that, because it's quite close to Glastonbury, I think often a lot of places near there get overlooked. But clearly there's a lot of connection to the strange in those particular locations.
There obviously is, isn't there? And I think there are real pockets like that around the whole of the UK that have those pockets. I was just looking at my database to see if I've got anything in Pusey, and I have.
Oh.
I've written about it in These Haunted Times 1.
Wow.
Yeah, a pub called the French Horn.
Oh.
And I've got another entry that I haven't written about yet for another pub in Pusey.
Oh, what's that?
So there you go. That's the Woodbridge Inn.
Oh, right. Well, I got talking to a few locals, so I shall see if they're up for going and checking those locations out.
Oh, definitely. basically.
What a brilliant name for a pub, the French. I love a weird pub name like that. That's a bit. It's not just the Rose and Crown or the White Lion or something. I like something a little bit different for a pub.
My favourite ever that I had lunch at once was the Pelican in Her Piety.
Oh,
how is that for the name of a pub? It was something to do with the coast. The pub itself was built, incredibly old building, and it was built near an old abbey in South Wales. And the Pelican in Her Piety is one of those old heraldic, like they would say the lion rampant.
Yeah.
Or, they have sort of strange names for how the picture looks, don't they? And the Pelican in Her Piety is one of those heraldic symbols, hence the name. But that's great. Where are you going for a pint tonight? Off down to the Pelican in Her Piety. Okay.
I wonder if is it the Bucket of Blood in Cornwall? I wonder if that's still open.
Oh, I don't know.
That's a brilliant name. I've always liked that one.
That is a brilliant name, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it's quite.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, Sheffield's quite pretty standard. We've got a couple of odd ones, but most of them are usually tied to the area or where they were or what was there previously or just the standard, like you say, Rose and Crown, White Lion, Red Lion, the usuals really. But with some good ones. The Shepley Spitfire is one of my favourites here. The pub, not particularly, but the name is very good.
Yeah. Is it named after the Spitfire?
I believe so, yes. So who knows? Who knows?
Well, I'm definitely not going to be running a pub anytime soon. Visiting a few.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just doing some research, Ruth, as always.
Absolutely. There's a group of us that are going, we haven't quite decided where yet, but we're going in February to stay in a pub of my choice that's haunted to stay overnight.
Fabulous.
So I'm taking a group of my mates with me, and that should be a laugh.
Absolutely.
See if we can find anything.
Yeah. Well, you've been going on a few ghost hunts recently, haven't you?
I've done one just now. When would that have been? That was the end of July, I think, or maybe of August. And there's a friend of mine lives near me, here locally, and she loves to come ghost hunting with me. Shout out to Kirsty. So we decided that this time we wouldn't go on a commercially run ghost hunt. We'd do one of our own. So I picked up my Roadmap of British Ghost books and I designed a sort of circular route that was about 90 miles and took in 12 or 13 haunted locations on the way. And we just spent into the wee early hours of the morning driving round to each of these and stopping and seeing if we could feel anything, sense anything, get anything recorded, whatever.
Yeah, brilliant.
Do a bit of call out.
Yeah.
We had a great night. We stopped for dinner on the way.
Yeah.
It's a nice pub. And we didn't have much in most of the locations. We did think we had for a minute.
Yeah.
There's a particular tiny little bridge down a tiny little narrow lane over a canal not far from Tring, which I've got in one of my books for having the ghost of a man with his little dog next to him standing on the bridge. And the way you approach the bridge in the car in this tiny little narrow lane is the bridge is quite a humpback with it being over a canal.
Yep.
So you kind of approach it up a steep hill, if you know what I mean. And it's also on a bend. So you're going up a steep hill and round a bend. So for a moment, your headlights are not catching the bridge because they're pointing up into the sky and the wrong way for the bend.
Yeah.
So you can imagine us driving along, and I've said to Kirsty, because she's in the passenger seat, obviously, you have the camera running on record to see if we pick anything up, because he's supposed to be glimpsed in the headlights. So we're approaching this bridge. I've slowed down. There's nothing behind me. It's about midnight. And as my headlights swing up into the air and away from the curve of the bridge, Kirsty suddenly goes, "Oh my God, I've got something." And as we sort of swing properly and carry on through, I pull over on the side of the road, as immediately over the other side of the bridge, and we check the camera. There was only a real person walking across the bridge. But because of the way the lights swung, it only caught his legs for a moment and looked quite ghostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a real person. But that being said, we did capture something interesting on a different road. I was particularly excited about going to see this one because I'd realised there was a correlation which I hadn't noticed when I wrote the books, because one end of this particular country lane is in Tring by the railway station, and the other end of it is in a village called Oldbury, and it's called Station Road at that point because it leads to Tring Station, I think.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know, maybe 3-4 miles between the two, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a ghost story at the Tring end for the sound of coach and horses trundling along the road, and a ghost story at the other end for the sight of a horse and cart along the road. And obviously they're the same end of the two ends of the same road. So I said to Kirsty, we're going to start at one end, drive along it, park up somewhere in the middle, see if we can, pick anything up, and then we'll carry on along it. So that's what we did. By this time it was, I don't know, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Beautiful, warm evening, pretty much cloudless sky, no moon. So you could see the stars, but it was quite dark. We pulled over in a sort of field gateway. And where we were sitting, we were on the side of a gently sloping hill, falling down away from the driver's side. So where I was sitting, I had a view across the land falling away from me. And where Kirsty was sitting, she had a view of the land climbing up away from her. And the road was sort of traversing across the hillside. Not much of a hill, just a gentle little hill. And we sat there and we're chatting, and both of us started feeling distinctly uncomfortable, which we've learned with all the ghost hunts to pay attention to. Because we don't get uncomfortable with just being out in the dark. We do it so often. So it's not like we're just sort of scared of being in the dark or anything like that. So we're chatting about how uncomfortable we're feeling and how the atmosphere is kind of heavy all of a sudden. Kirsty's taking pictures without the flash with her phone, and I'd got one of those laser thermometers where you can point the little red laser dot at anything and it registers what the temperature of that thing is. So I was sort of pointing it all around the field and the road and the hedge and everything, and I was getting an average sort of 13.8, 13.9, 14 degrees Celsius. And Kirsty suddenly said, "Did you hear that?" And I hadn't, so I said, "No." She said, "I just heard what sounded like one of those old-fashioned hunting horns. The sort of doo-doo-doo, but far away in the distance." Now, bear in mind, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. There sure as hell isn't a hunt going on or anything. So I said, "Well, that's odd." I said, "There is the train line. It wasn't a train." She said, "No, absolutely not a train. It was a much quieter noise than a train makes and sounded like one of those old-fashioned horns." I said, "Oh, that's odd." So we sat for a few more minutes, and then I jumped and said, "Did you hear that?" to Kirsty. "No." And I just heard two men's voices drift across sort of behind the car somewhere. Now, bear in mind, we're 2 miles out from the nearest town, so there's no way you're catching the sound from anywhere around. There are no buildings, no farms, just there. We're in the middle of nowhere. So we both know she hadn't heard it, but I couldn't hear what they said. But it was like a little snippet of conversation between two male voices. So we sat a few more minutes, and I'm still playing with my laser thermometer. And all of a sudden, I've pointed it in the middle of the lane ahead of us, where, if you think about it, this ghostly horse and carriages should be rolling if it's going to be. And it suddenly dropped from 13.8 degrees C to 0.6 degrees C.
Blimey.
And it read a 0.6, a 0.8, a 1.2, and then shot back up to 13.8. Now, you and I both know, do not get temperature drops like that on a balmy summer's evening in England. It's just not possible. So, and I'm a complete loss to explain what did that, other than perhaps I caught the coach and horse coming towards us. Who knows? But the funny thing was that immediately after doing it, we were both trying to get it to do it again. So I'm pointing all around with this laser thing, and I'm looking down this slope of hill that, if you can imagine, is in that kind of black and white silvery colour you get at night. And there's no moon, so it's not particularly brightly lit, but you can see by the starlit light. And I say to Kirsty, what are all those things out in that field? They weren't there before, were they? And there's like a long line of dark shapes across the field, not too far from. As she looks across, she went, "No, they definitely weren't there a minute ago." So we both got a bit freaked out. So I turned the car engine on and swung the car hard across the road so as I could light this field up with my headlights. And it was a herd of about 20 or 30 deer crossing this field about, 40 yards from the car. All looking at us with that sort of like, "What did you put the light on for?" We decided we'd had enough at that point.
But it just shows you how many of those were there and you didn't hear them.
Didn't hear them at all. Not one single sound from the deer crossing there. And yet we got that weird temperature drop just 2-3 minutes before the deer suddenly appeared. So yeah, it was a strange night, and nowhere else made us feel as freaked out as that heavy feeling that place had. We went to another location, which is meant to have the ghosts of 3 soldiers from the Civil War that are sometimes seen there.
Yeah.
And it's down in quite a deep little valley for Bedfordshire, overgrown by trees, tiny little country lane. And we pulled up in a field gateway, and it was so overhung with trees at this point and down this little valley bit that it was actually so pitch black once I turned the car lights off that even when our eyes adjusted to the dark, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face.
Oof, that is dark.
It was pitch dark. But neither of us were even slightly scared there. And we were about to get out the car, get out our folding chairs and sit out in the dark to see if we could hear anything. But just as I started to do this whomping great hornet flew past. It's like, no, staying in the car. But it just goes to show that the previous location had been a nice open vista. You could see all around the car. And yet that felt creepy.
Yeah.
But the one that was all you'd think would feel creepy, so completely dark you couldn't see anything, felt absolutely fine. So trust your gut is what I say.
I suppose you as well. You're quite spoilt with that ability to be able to create your own ghost trip, really, Ruth, with the amount of cases you've got and the fact that you've written several books about the haunted roads. So I suppose you're the easiest person ever to kind of get an itinerary together for her.
I probably am.
A ghostly car drive somewhere. You'd be you killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Absolutely. And funny enough, I do know of a lot of investigators who've mentioned that they use my 2 Road Map of British Ghost books that way.
Yes.
Because they're laid out county by county, you can literally plan an itinerary of haunted locations to visit where you don't need permission to go in.
Yeah.
Because they're just roadways, byways, pathways. They're open places. So they are quite handy for planning road trips, I must admit.
Yeah. It's quite strange. I mean, I got an email a few months ago, and I haven't spoken to you since, so I thought I'd saved it. And I got an email from somebody saying that they'd listened to my episode about Stocksbridge Bypass, which I did in the first 6 months, I think. I think that was the first Halloween episode that I did with Dr. David Clark. So that's 2019. And he said, I've been listening to the show and I've just started going back through them and I realised I hadn't listened to this particular episode. And I'm shocked because I had an incident there before the bypass was built. And I was like, ooh, really? Tell me more. And he'd been driving on there in 1981, which was 6 years before the bypass was built. Because the bypass was built, as you may imagine, Ruth, because it was one of the main arteries outside of Sheffield. And the traffic was just horrendous that was running through Stocksbridge, which is like it's not a small town, but it's not big enough to be dealing with heavy industrial traffic on a standard scale, really. Yeah. And so it's kind of that kind of, it takes you out and then it brings you over the peaks into Huddersfield and those kinds of places. It's kind of like the connection to West Yorkshire and gets you out of it without being on the M1. And so the road was very well travelled and busy constantly. And they were driving over one particular night and thought they saw a shape lurch across the road at 1 o'clock in the morning. The headlights hit them and it looked, in their interpretation, to be a dark, hulking figure looking like it was wearing a cloak of some description. And it just seemed it just disappeared over the banking. And obviously when they got chance to come back on another day, they realised that banking, it was like a 10-foot drop. But what they saw just carried straight across. It didn't drop. And he didn't know anything about Stocksbridge Bypass being haunted until he'd heard that episode.
And that's really interesting because one of the things, I think we've talked about it before, is that some of the stories about Stocksbridge are, people say, or there's a rumour that people see a monk there, and there's never been anything to do with monks around there.
No.
But we've spoken in the past, haven't we, about people misinterpret what they see when they think somebody's wearing something.
Yeah.
Because most of us are not fashion historians.
No, sadly.
So, we could probably say it's roughly Victorian looking, or it's roughly 1920s looking.
Yeah.
Most of us could probably pick that out of the lineup. But when you get any further back from that, from sort of 1700s backwards, for centuries and centuries, dress was reasonably similar to the untrained eye. To the trained eye, there were vast differences, but the untrained eye, particularly if you're talking rural dress as opposed to posh court dress or anything, people are going to be wearing fairly simple clothing with heavy cloaks over it.
Yes.
So the chance of seeing a person wearing a heavy cloak, I would have thought, is fairly good, really. It's the interpretation of it as a monk that gets wrong.
Yes.
So,
I mean, like you say, I think that's a really good point that people often don't think about, because sometimes people say, oh, well, why are they all wearing the same kind of clothes? Are they all from the same area? But as you say, your average person outside of the gentry or the upper classes in Britain up until about 1950, you would suggest, there was a complete difference between what the rich wore and what the average person wore, Ruth. Completely.
yeah.
And it's as you say, it stayed very similar. I would imagine what a farmhand or a farm wife wore throughout the 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th centuries barely changed, other than perhaps the materials might have gone under some slight alteration, or colour may have been a bit more brighter than previous, with it being just, your normal whites and browns and blacks and things.
And hem probably went up and down a bit,
Yes, absolutely.
But your average Joe wouldn't tell which was which, would they?
Absolutely, I couldn't tell. If you put three women who worked in domestic servitude from the 1700s, the 1800s and the mid-18th century, I probably wouldn't know which was which, because I would imagine they all look very similar, because clothes were functional, not fashionable.
Yeah. And people didn't have wardrobes of clothes like we have.
No.
For so much of history, you were lucky if you had more than two changes of clothes. The one you were wearing and the one you were washing was about what most people had. Some people were lucky enough to have a Sunday best set.
Yes.
So, they were very, very functional for, like you say, most stratas of society and through large parts of history. And like I say, if you're a fashion historian, I'm sure you'd be pointing at 100 different differences. But to the untrained eye, you're looking at a version of longer skirts, blouse-type tops, shawls for the women, some sort of heavy trouser, maybe a stock or sort of smock or jacket-type top for the men.
Yeah.
It's going to be fairly similar looking. And the cloak that goes over the top of it all for bad weather is probably fairly ubiquitous for most of English history,
yes,
or British history, and I think it's our modern eye that sees a cloak and goes, "Oh, must be a monk," rather than just realise it could actually be anybody. It's the same thing, isn't it? That you hear galloping hooves at night, and we tend to go here in Britain, "Oh, it's a highwayman. That must be the ghost of a highwayman." Well, it's probably not. It could be the ghost of a soldier. It could be the ghost of a farm worker. It could be the ghost of the local lord. Because everybody rode horses and galloped about.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. Even something as ubiquitous as a bicycle is a fairly modern invention. I think, what is it, 1870, 1880?
I beg to not know.
somewhere it's toward the latter end of the 19th century the bicycle came out, really. I mean, obviously, everybody knows where a penny farthing or the old one, or the bone shakers. They used to call them bone shakers because they had no tyres. You're like, because everywhere was cobbled as well. You're like, so, good for your digestion.
I wish you people listening could see the
my performance.
The Paul's performance of somebody on a bone shaker bicycle.
It's a very visual medium, unfortunately, not for the listeners.
It's very.
And so people rode horses up until the mid to late 19th century here.
Yeah.
For anywhere. Any. I mean, this is the thing sometimes we...
Actually, I'd even say to the mid-20th century.
Oh, certainly in rural areas.
Yeah, because it wasn't really until between the two world wars, and then after the Second World War, mechanisation really took off.
Yeah. That
horses were still used in rural areas, all the time.
Yeah. All the things we take for granted are fairly recent public transport.
Yeah.
Buses and trains even. I mean, trains, it's 200 years. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Buses, God knows when the first buses start. We didn't get the motor car till the end of the 19th century. So there weren't any buses before that. You would usually see somebody with like you mentioned, wagon and horses and go around the village and pick people up and take them places, take them to the factory and stuff. You saw that sometimes. But there was nothing like that. So it is strange how people automatically think horse hooves must be a highwayman, when every single person up until about 1880 had to use a horse because there was no other way of getting to places most of the time.
No other way of getting there, no. And the nearest thing to public transport would have been the coaching route.
Yes, and they were only specifics.
Yeah, and they, took days to get from one end of the country to the other, and that's why you have all the coaching in.
Yeah.
And yes, they were predated upon by the highwaymen, but that's still the only route to go by horse. So assuming you've got a highwayman ghost just because you've heard some galloping hooves is just the desire in us to make a good story out of it, which is why I like to, in my books, I like to write exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And not sort of extrapolate from that it might be the ghost of this person or that person. What you get is what you see.
Absolutely. Well, as we said, we've mentioned this before when we talk about some celebrity ghosts like Anne Boleyn being in 6-7 different locations
on the same night at the same time.
Yeah. It's always, it must be that person, even though.
Yes.
Did you see their face? Did they say, hello, I'm Anne? Or did you just see a woman running through in certain style of clothing?
Yes, and I think I'm right in saying that there's not very many portraits of Anne Boleyn.
No.
I think there might only be one or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if you were lucky enough to see a full-bodied apparition, and even if it actually was Anne Boleyn, the chances of you being able to identify certainly, oh yes, that's Anne Boleyn, are nil. Like literally nil. Because the portraits that they did back then, whatever she really looked like, the artist isn't going to paint that. He's going to paint an idealised version of that. So you probably tell she had whatever colour hair and whatever colour eyes.
Yeah.
And was of a certain age. But beyond that, you couldn't really say much because if she had hooked nose or something.
Yes.
The artist isn't going to paint that in and then get beheaded by a furious King Henry VIII. Stop making my bride look ugly.
Yeah.
So we don't have an accurate picture of her, or indeed anybody else from then or earlier, to be able to say it was definitely them. And I think so often we just like to assume it was somebody famous.
Yes. Well, as I said that, I thought, actually, I have no idea how many portraits there are. So I found this out for us.
Oh, go on then.
After Henry VIII had her executed, he ordered the removal and destruction of all her portraits in all the royal houses, and they were all destroyed. There are no contemporary portraits of Anne Boleyn that survived. Every single one was destroyed. And so every image we have of her is a copy of a copy or an interpretation of a memory of an image. There are 2 sketches from that period that survive. However, both have got the word Anne on, but there is no confirmation that it refers to Anne Boleyn. And to be fair, most people believe that the images we consider to look like her probably didn't actually look that much like her due to the amount of time, because people weren't allowed to paint her portrait either during Henry VIII's lifetime.
Blimey, when that man got cross with his wives, he really got cross with his wives, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Holy moly, that is one bitter man.
Yes, so I would imagine that probably happened to the others, but it's one of those things.
Yeah,
once again, I think it's one of those perceptions that people think, if you said to somebody, what does Anne Boleyn look like? I mean, these days they always try to make her this kind of voluptuous sex fiend who's creating some kind of Machiavellian plotting and scheming behind the scenes, whereas it seemed that everybody was doing that in those days anyway, usually Ruth to keep their influence and friends close, as it were. So it is, I think, once again, it's one of those things. People think they know what she looked like, but I've just confirmed, there is no actual portrait of her that we can categorically say that was painted while she was alive.
No, and the places where she's meant to haunt have such extraordinarily long histories that we come back to, even if you saw a full apparition, which you and I both know is quite rare.
Yes.
And that apparition was wearing long dresses of some sort, and perhaps even a ruff or something of that era. There are still at least 100 years that, unless you're a real art historian and clothing historian, where you would not be able to say for certain that was for the period that Anne Boleyn was alive. And even if you were, there were loads of other women in the court, and any of them could have been haunting the building.
Absolutely. Well, Henry certainly had at least 6 goes at it, so it could be any of them.
Yeah.
and I'm sure he had a few special friends as well.
I'm sure he probably did.
I find it very hard to believe that a man so frivolous with his marriage proposals would be a good boy when he wasn't married.
No, or even when he was married.
Very much so. Very much so. Especially promoted chambermaids or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, the man changed the whole religion of England just in order to marry Anne Boleyn, didn't he?
Yep. Yeah. And that all worked out well.
So young.
Yes.
Yeah, she was really young. So this sort of Machiavellian creature they tend to try and portray today, is that really likely for how young she was? Is it more likely to have been her father, actually?
Absolutely. And especially that the other aspect of this that often gets overlooked is that obviously she had extra fingers. She had an extra digit on each hand. And so that's why she wore gloves a lot.
I'd forgotten that, but you're right. She did, didn't she?
Yeah, is it polydactyl? She was polydactyl?
I think that's the right word.
Yeah, and so she had an extra digit on each hand, so she used to wear gloves a lot. So that, to me, would suggest that that's not somebody who wants to make or draw attention to themselves, other than the fact that she's marrying the king.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But, yeah, I don't think she really makes as many appearances as she's meant to, bless her.
Oh, well, I mean, that's a prime example, like I say. People are telling us that they've seen Anne Boleyn, but nobody knows what she actually looked like. We just have a rough idea, maybe. So it makes you wonder what other people of that. I mean, how did he do that to all the wives he divorced? I mean, he only killed 2. Yeah, because he had 2 executed, didn't he? Two divorced, two. Hang on, what was it? Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
Yes.
So there's 2 could be running about headless.
Whose pictures he allowed to survive? But
yes, yeah. Could be, and we certainly, obviously, the last one. I know, strangely, people said Anne of Cleves kept a picture of Anne Boleyn, but nobody's sure if that's true either. And you think, well, hang on a minute, why's his ex-wife got one? What's going on here?
I don't think I want to know.
No, I don't either. I don't know. Let's leave Henry and his bad behaviour where it belongs back in the 16th century, I think. So, as I mentioned, we're eagerly awaiting the release of your new book, which usually lands this side of Christmas for us, for stocking fillers galore for any of us that love your work, Ruth. You've got a couple of intriguing stories that deal with a subject we've touched on in the past, but perhaps not to the extent that people often report having strange experiences, which is hospitals.
Yeah, I seem to have several hospital stories in this book, which will hopefully be out in time for Halloween.
Ooh.
With a bit of luck, I'm nearly there. And I think, well, who knows? But I've mentioned a couple of times that I've got fewer hospital stories than you would think. But this book I've got several in, because people have written into me with them. So keep them coming, people, because there obviously are quite a few haunted hospitals out there. I'm quite glad that I had a stay in hospital last year. I'm quite glad it wasn't haunted because I wasn't feeling well enough to deal with any ghosts. But yeah, one of them is Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge. And this was actually a friend of mine who heard me talking about it. And I know you're looking puzzled. It's because I didn't send you this one. Don't worry. She was a nurse for most of her working career, and she worked at Addenbrooke's for a little while. And she can remember being on the night shift this particular night, and she was working up on the 8th floor of the building, and she was doing her duties as normal, very quiet wards, obviously everybody's asleep. She walked past the doors that led into the stairwell and quite clearly heard the sound of a baby crying. totally puzzled by that because they were on a ward where there were no babies, and the paediatric ward was nowhere even close to where she was. It was in a different building, nowhere near her on the 8th floor. Absolutely no way a baby would be up on the 8th floor. And it was in the middle of the night. There's no way this is even somebody visiting who's brought a baby with them. So she called her colleague over, who was sort of, just a few feet away from her, and said, did you hear that? Did you just hear that baby? The police said no, she couldn't hear it. So my friend Emma walked over to the stairwell, the door to the stairwell. She could still hear the baby crying, even though her colleague couldn't hear anything, and opened the door to poke her head out into the stairwell, if you know what I mean, see whether it was coming from up or below or whatever. But the moment she opened that door, sound stopped dead. She couldn't hear it at all. And she was never able to find a rational explanation for that, because she could clearly hear it, and it was clearly a baby crying, and a colleague couldn't hear a thing. And there was, like I say, 8th floor, middle of the night. That's not the sound of a fox or anything carrying on the night, because they can sometimes sound a bit like a baby.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be the sound filtering in from outside up on the 8th floor of a baby crying, I wouldn't have thought. And she just never could find the answer to that. But she heard it totally clearly. Isn't that odd?
Yeah, that's very strange. I mean, that is often the thing, that when you hear these kind of noises, sometimes it's either the time of day or the location that makes you, that suddenly your brain kicks in and goes, oh, hang on, why am I hearing that? And I think sometimes it takes a few seconds for the brain to go, why are we hearing that noise here?
Yes, it doesn't fit. This does not fit for where I am currently standing and what I'm currently doing and the time of night. Who the heck's brought a baby in? But then for the noise to stop the moment she opened the door, and her friend, her colleague nurse, couldn't hear it at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know, make of that what you will. But that was not the only one. I've got Portsmouth.
Yes.
Down in Hampshire. This was the Royal Portsmouth Hospital, and it used to be on Commercial Road, which is quite close to the dockyards. It was actually founded in 1821. It was originally the Portsmouth and Portsea General Dispensary, and then it moved on to its final location at Commercial Road and ran itself there as the Royal Portsmouth, Portsea and Gosport Hospital from 1849. And it carried on right through until 1979, when it finally closed. And there was a period in the late 1800s when it had what used to be known as the Lock Ward on it. And this was a ward that was used for the treatment of prostitutes from the dockyards. And there was a Contagious Diseases Act of 1863, which gave the police powers at the time, where if they went down to the docks, found a prostitute who looked as though she had any sort of an infection, they could do an inspection, a compulsory examination. And if they thought there was infection, they could cart her back to hospital and lock her in until a doctor pronounced her clean of infection before they let her out again.
Oh, good Lord.
So that's a fascinating bit of history, and I imagine wasn't too pleasant at the time.
Yes.
There is a legend attached to the hospital that there's a blood stain on the floor in one of the operating theatres that they can't clean. But whether there's anything to that or not, I don't know. But I was particularly interested in it because my witness Barry wrote into me and told me about an experience he had when he was 4 years old. He was only about 4 at the time, and he'd slipped over whilst playing. He was running about.
Yeah.
And he ran across a patch of wet linoleum in his at home and banged his head hard enough to cut it open. So imagine this toddler with a cut open head.
Yes.
So he's taken down to the hospital, which was the Old Royal then, and he can remember, even though he was so young, being wheeled in a wheelchair through the corridors to go and get his head stitched. And he was scared as this little 4-year-old because there were people laying on mattresses in the corridor who some of them had bandages around their heads that were blood soaked. The corridor itself seemed really dimly lit. People were groaning.
No.
And he remembers being absolutely terrified of this little lad being wheeled away from mummy and daddy to go and have his head stitched up. And there's all these blood-covered people lying on mattresses. And he was really scared that he'd be made to lay down on one of these mattresses and kept there. So he was ever so relieved when they stitched him up and he was given back to mummy and daddy and sent home to recuperate. Never thought nothing more of it. That was that. Until he was a young man, So many years later, as a young man, he happened to be talking to an old chap who was a local, and they've just got gossiping one day. And this old man was busy praising the old Royal Hospital, which by this time had long since closed, and how efficient and how clean it always used to be, and what a shame they'd closed it, and all of this. And of course, Barry sort of said to him, well, I didn't think it was clean and efficient. I thought it was dim and horrible with all those people lying on mattresses in the corridors with blood-stained bandages. It was a horrible place. And of course, this old man had looked at him and said that never happened past the Second World War. That was the only time that ever happened, because every night the German bomber planes would aim for the dockyards, obviously.
Yes.
Cause immense devastation in Portsmouth. So every night the wounded would be brought to the hospital. There were too many of them to cope with. So they did lay mattresses on the floor in all the corridors, and the sort of walking wounded, if you like, or, you know, the not so terminally injured, were bandaged up and laid there to kind of wait their turn to be seen properly.
Yeah.
But that had happened in the Second World War, not in 1979. So as a 4-year-old child, he'd obviously seen something that was either a playback or a time slip, or who knows. He just didn't know, because as a child he just accepted what he was seeing, and was terrified by it. Isn't that curious?
It is. And the thing that makes you think, well, he's obviously only seeing a certain period of time, is you would imagine that even a 4-year-old would recognise people wearing funny clothes, or clothes that they weren't used to seeing. Whereas you would suggest that people in the Second World War were probably dressed similarly, not exactly the same, but similarly to how people dressed in the 70s, without a few fashion faux pas, you would suggest. Ruth?
Yeah. But not enough that a 4-year-old would notice. Exactly. Yeah.
It would be, they would have to be wearing peculiar clothing for it to be even more so. Because I think, once again, Portsmouth's one of those places that a lot of people don't understand just how much damage was caused to that particular location during the Second World War. I saw a brilliant guest on Antiques Roadshow a few weeks ago whose father was given a gallantry medal for his services, and he'd driven all the women and children out of Portsmouth for 60 hours straight, Ruth.
Wow.
During the bombardment. And he was blown up twice and thrown into the docks. And on both occasions, he swam and climbed out, got back on his bus and carried on for 60 hours. He also detonated an incendiary bomb that landed on top of his bus and threw it in the docks.
Holy, that is a hero.
Absolutely. When his son found his medal when he was about, I don't know, in the 50s, he just said, oh yeah, they gave him to everybody back then. And he never told him what he'd done. And they didn't know what his dad had done until he died.
Wow.
So I'm not surprised there may be a few strange sightings in and around Portsmouth Hospital. And as I said to you earlier, it is a location I visited in the late 80s. And I just didn't like the place. It just didn't feel nice.
And it would have been derelict at that point, wouldn't it?
By then, yeah, it's been closed down for, I think it shut in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, 1979.
Yeah, it wasn't long after this experience.
And it stood for a while. And then eventually those buildings were demolished and they built a Sainsbury's on the site.
Yep.
That closed in 2021. Because I did my usual due diligence after getting this story from Barry, and went out locally to ask if anybody else had ever experienced anything there. So that's interesting to hear that you had in terms of a bad feeling about the place.
Yeah, I didn't know it was haunted.
No, but one of the people that wrote back to me, and we'll call her Jenny, she used to work in the kitchens at the hospital. And obviously she was of an age where she was friends with all the young nurses who worked there. And the nurses, of course, lived in the nurses' quarters then.
Yes.
So the girls would all go out for a night on the town together, and they'd usually be out till later than the last bus. So although it wasn't really allowed, the girls used to sneak Jenny into the nurses' quarters, stay the night, so she didn't have to pay for a taxi home.
Yes.
So she ended up staying overnight there. And if she walked down the corridor to sort of go to the bathroom or whatever it might be, she always said there was a really weird feeling and a sense of not being alone. And sometimes the corridor lights would turn off and on by themselves. So she's obviously picking up that same creepy feeling that years later you picked up on,
Yeah.
even though the place was now derelict when you went to it.
Mm.
But on one of those nights, she actually settled down to sleep in an armchair in the staff lounge, just for somewhere to bunk down for the night sort of thing.
Yeah.
And she sort of curled up on this big armchair, and she'd got a cover draped over herself, and she was just falling asleep when she felt someone tug the cover up over her, as if tucking her in.
Yes.
Kindly, nicely.
Yeah.
And she sort of opened her eyes to thank whoever it was, and there was nobody there. So there is definitely something about that building. And interestingly, a paranormal investigator got in touch with me as well and said that in 2024, they went to do a paranormal investigation in the now empty Sainsbury's building, which of course is built on the site of the old hospital. And they didn't have very much happen, but they had a strange flash of light, which they could not find any source for when they were in the area of what would have been the meatpacking room for Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
But they also heard the sound of a bell ring, which was the type of bell ring noise that used to be the old call bell
Yes.
that the hospital would have had.
Mm.
So they definitely had that happen. He said, other than that, it was quite a quiet night and not much happened. So, he sort of says they think the paranormal activity might be kind of winding down over time.
Mm.
But they definitely had that flash of light and that bell ring.
Yeah. I'm sure we talked about a haunted supermarket on one particular episode. Isn't there a haunted Asda somewhere?
I've got a haunted Asda, I've got haunted Sainsbury's, I've got haunted Morris's, I've got haunted shops.
Yeah. I'm sure we talked about a haunted Asda that ended up, we found, you'd discovered it had been built on something that perhaps it shouldn't have been. I'm sure we've covered a haunted Asda.
I'm sure we will have done, yes, because I have so many, genuinely so many haunted supermarkets and smaller shops. And in actual fact, if you go to Blandford Forum, I think I've got a ghost in just about every shop on the high street there now. Several of them is the same ghost.
You'll have to see if you've got one in Waitrose, and you'll be able to find them at the deli counter, perhaps.
You never know.
Be the ghost of Phil Oakey from the Human League here. He's always in Waitrose here in Sheffield.
Oh, is he?
Yes. It's the only time I ever see him normally. He's in Waitrose.
Has he still got his hair cut asymmetrically?
No.
No.
It's
Grew out of that then.
Yeah, it's all on his chin now, his hair these days.
Oh, bless him.
Yes. But yeah, so I would not be surprised, because as we've often talked about locations and as we talk about hospitals, strangely, hospitals that became a supermarket, which is an odd leap, but I suppose it's prime real estate in a city in the UK.
Yeah.
Is that you would imagine there would be lots of these, because a lot of them would have been repurposed or built on places that would have had a history. But also, these are probably the busiest areas in the country. Wherever you are, Ruth, doesn't matter if you're Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, supermarkets are busy all the time. There are so many of them. Thousands and thousands of people go through the doors each day. There is a lot of emotional attachments. And we always look at like haunted pubs or haunted schools or things like that, or universities or other buildings where there's been a lot of traffic over the years. And sometimes people seem to overlook supermarkets, but I would be more surprised that there weren't any. I mean, I know there are some, but it would be more surprising to me that we didn't get stories from shops and supermarkets than the opposite, to be fair. And
I think one of the things to remember about that is that most supermarkets are exactly what it says on the tin. They're quite a big building. They are a supermarket, which means in most city centres, as you said, prime real estate, they've been built over something that got knocked down and disused, whatever. I'm thinking of one, I can't remember what town it is. Bridgenorth. It's not a supermarket, but it was a carpet factory. And then I think part of it became a supermarket at some point, and then houses. But they were all built on the grounds of an old abbey. If you go back far enough in history. And I think if you're looking at supermarkets for the main part are going to build themselves in the best location they can for foot traffic, convenience for shoppers, obviously, which means they're going to build over an estate that's already gone inside a city centre. So they're going to be where the old pub stood, or the old hostelry, or the old shops, or whatever it might be. There's going to be history to that land. And it's really only the supermarkets that you see out on the edges of the big town, where they have the big sort of industrial retail estates or whatever, and you get some big supermarkets on those. that are served mostly by car, they're more likely to be built on virgin ground. But even then, I think you still stand a fair chance of that getting haunted by something like an elemental or whatever, because you're building on land.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'm not sure what it's like in your neck of the woods, but one of the other things we've got here, obviously, is, this was a major coal area, Ruth. And so a lot of the old pit sites have been turned into like industrial estates or mini little shopping complexes, and you've got like littles and oldies thrown up on them as well.
Yeah.
Built on top of old pits, which we know, without a shadow of a doubt, was one of the most dangerous jobs you could do in the British Isles, even
And
up until
so
the
many
modern...
of them were haunted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've seen countless stories. I will have to check and see if I can do some digging, because I know where I grew up, which is ironically made me chuckle when I saw one of the other news stories you'd got, but I'll explain that when we get there, because obviously I grew up in Barnsley, which is coal central in the 1980s, home of Arthur Scargill, I'm sure many people would not really care about, depending on your persuasion, shall we say. And so we've got a lot of little places that have been thrown up on old pits where they just turned them into sort of shops. Now you get a lot of sort of little small businesses, especially in Barnsley and locations where they've changed these areas that were thriving pits for the community into sort of localised shopping centres, or you've got warehouses there, or even, as I mentioned, a Lidl or an Aldi.
Yeah, and when you think about pits particularly, not only have they got the human history, but the miners that used to go down them had a lot of folklore about things that were found underground or heard underground, like the Tommyknockers, what have you. So you've actually got a whole slew of possible paranormal occurrences because of the nature of that land.
Yes.
But just because you kind of seal off what's underground and build something modern over the top of it isn't necessarily going to make that a quiet building,
No,
shall we say?
Very much so. There is a very intriguing segment on Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World back in 1980, I think that was, Ruth. And there is a section that talks about a couple of haunted pits, including an interview with a guy saying that he would never go underground again, and he's taken a pay cut because he won't go down because of what he saw.
Wow.
Very, very matter of fact in Broad Yorkshire. Oh, I'm not going back down there, no chance, because of what he saw.
What did he see?
He saw a ghost wearing an old-fashioned helmet and one of the old swinging lamps, and it scared him witless. He just ran back to the lift and came straight back up and won't go back down, shaking wreck. But I've found a couple of books that were written in the early 90s up here called Pit Ghosts, Pad Feet and Poltergeists. There's 2 volumes by a local author whose name escapes me, to my shame. And there are dozens of pit ghost stories in there, some of which are very creepy.
Well, I wouldn't mind getting a hold of a copy of that, actually, because there's something about being underground that lends itself to quite a primal fear in humans, isn't there?
Yes.
You obviously you've got claustrophobia is one thing. But aside from that, if you visit any kind of underground cave system, even man-made cave system, a lot of people in the group will feel creeped out. It's quite common for us as humans to feel uncomfortable underground.
Yes.
Not our natural environment, is it? Actually, I've got Chislehurst Caves is in this book coming up.
Oh.
Now we think about it, I've got Chislehurst Caves in there and some encounters in there. So that's another underground story coming up in these Haunted Times 6. So,
brilliant.
But yeah, I've been in a few cave systems. I've been in the Hellfire Caves in High Wycombe.
Oh.
And that's a man-made cave.
Yes.
As opposed to, a natural one that's been dug out. But it still has a very odd atmosphere to it in places.
Yeah.
It's well worth a visit if you're in High Wycombe.
Yes, absolutely. The fact that they leave random objects in there which could catch the unassuming or person who's not paying attention off guard doesn't help either, Ruth, because I've seen a few walkthroughs of there and there seems to be strange figures dotted about all over the place.
I think there are now, but when I went there wasn't. It was a lot of years ago that I went, showing my age now, but I bet it was 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, I've never had the chance yet. I'd love to visit them. That one, and obviously the location in Ireland as well, where they would travel over to.
There's another one in, now is it Royston or Baldock, that has an underground Knights Templar cave that's just one single bell-shaped room And my husband and I have been to that.
Is that the one where it's off the street, Rue?
Yeah, it's literally underneath the street.
Yes.
And it's only open at certain times of the year.
Mm.
And there's this funny little door in the side of a building.
Yes.
And you go in and you just go down these steep wooden steps, whatever you want to call them, into this sort of bell-shaped chamber that's been hewn out under the road.
Mm.
And it's all covered in secret Knights Templar symbols carved all over the walls and everything.
Mm.
It's creepy as hell in there.
Yeah. Yes. I've definitely seen that fairly recently. So I know that's as soon as you said it, I thought, I think I know where that is, but I don't know which village it's in. But
it's either Royston or Baldock.
Yeah, it's a very strange location. Like you say, it's one of those random things. It's just there, and if you didn't know it, you would complete there must be hundreds of people walk past that every day and not know it's there.
Yeah, because there's a little sort of grate in the pavement that acts as an air shaft for it, if you like, and people will walk over that and never know what they've just walked over constantly. Day in, day out. It is literally on the main street.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many of those little strange locations that you sometimes, as you say, unless you go there or you know somebody that knows that particular location, you would be completely oblivious to it. So
yeah, totally.
What I did like as well is that not only have we got a haunted hospital in Portsmouth, but clearly you know enough about Hampshire to think if you talk about Portsmouth, you can't talk about Southampton, otherwise they get the face on, and vice versa. such is their rivalry. And that particular location on the south coast here. And here we are, a few miles up the road. We've got another haunted hospital in Southampton, which is another area that suffered a terrible barrage during the Second World War as well. But this one's a slightly different encounter.
Yeah, I suspect this is probably a more modern go. And this is a really sweet little encounter in one way. Not the real name, I'm using pseudonyms as usual, but Heather wrote to me. She'd been listening to podcast I'd been on, which I suspect was this one. Funnily enough.
Hello, Heather, if you're listening.
Or whatever your real name is, yeah. But I happened to be talking on the podcast that she was listening to about a ghost child.
Mm.
And it reminded her about this experience, so she wrote in with me with it. And she actually wrote, she said, I work at Southampton General Hospital, and I was on my break. The weather was mild and it was a nice day. So I'd gone to sit outside the main entrance to eat my lunch. I noticed a little girl playing on those big silver ball decorative things that used to be there. I think they might actually still be there because I looked on Google Maps and they seem to still be there. But the things I mean, Heather means that they're sort of literally big silver metal balls, and sometimes they've got water running over them.
Yes, absolutely. Just a nice decorative statement.
Decorative item.
Yeah.
But they've got this little seating area just out the front of the main door into the hospital where people can sit and eat their lunch, and they've got these little installations around and benches and what have you, just to make it a nice place to sit. So this is where Heather was sitting. But she noticed this little girl that was playing around these big silver balls. She said, I noticed that she's very pale with dark circles under her eyes and no hair on her head. I remember thinking, oh, bless her little heart, thinking she was probably an oncology patient, cancer treatment, and had probably been taken outside just to play in the fresh air for a little bit by her family. So she's sitting there eating her sandwiches, and she says, as time went on, though, and I sat watching it, no one seemed to interact with her. I looked about and realised I couldn't identify that any of the people I could see might be an adult or a member of staff accompanying her. I looked back at her and was not unduly worried that she was laughing and giggling and looked happy, despite looking unwell. So I looked around again for a sign of somebody with her, but when I glanced back, she'd just disappeared. She'd been watching her for a good 10 or 15 minutes as she ate a sandwich at this point, and she literally glanced away for a second, and the child had just disappeared. And she, at no point, when she sat and thought about it afterwards, during that 10, 15 minutes, had anybody else reacted to the child, spoken to the child, gone near the child. So it was as if she was the only one that could see her. So, yeah, she says it always leaves her feeling both happy and sad when she thinks of her, because obviously she was unwell.
Yes.
But at the same time, she was obviously so happy to be outside and playing around that it's kind of hard to be sad to see her so happy, if you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. And like you say, the key thing there is if you've got a child who looks that ill in a hospital, there is assistance seconds away, footsteps away. They don't leave children like that wandering around.
No.
Especially for that period of time. If it was, I saw this child and it was there, and then I looked back and it wasn't. But we've got like 10 15 minutes.
Yeah, watching this child.
And then it's blink of an eye and she disappears.
Yeah. I hope that this is one of those replay moments where that was just a moment in time, and maybe that little girl went on and became well and, left the hospital and was fine. And what we're actually seeing there is a replay of a moment that meant something to her and imprinted in some way.
Yeah.
But of course, we could be seeing the spirit of a child who lost her life. Don't know.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that's the problem you get with that we try to. Well, some people, certainly, Ruth, they try to create a backstory to those kind of encounters. And yet, like you say, you perfectly encapsulated it there. It's a brief moment in time. We've no idea what happened before or since. We just know that this is a poorly child in a period of her life that gave her joy for whatever reason. And therefore, that's all we should focus on, sadly. Yeah. That's quite sad, because I think we can. This is where you start getting these stories that build up around certain sightings. That somebody will say, "Oh, well, this girl she was called Sarah and she died 3 weeks later." Well, how do we know that? We don't know that. We don't know that. People just prescribe things to it, and it happens a lot. But I think that's. I understand that it can be tainted with sadness, but also gives you joy. But I think if you look at that moment in time, that clearly, whatever the reason for that replay and that insight to that moment in that child's life was one of joy and happiness.
It was a moment of joy,
yeah, and that's what we needed to hold on to.
Yeah, I think so, because I think trying to ascribe a backstory to it, like you say, is pointless. Because frankly, the sad fact is children do die of cancer, and children will have died at cancer at that hospital and every other hospital that deals with cancer patients up and down the country.
Yes.
So trying to assign one particular child, I think, would be grossly unfair. And at the same time, we don't even know what causes these sightings.
No.
We don't know that child died. We don't know that that's a spirit or a ghost that she was seeing. We just know that it was a glimpse of something odd, and that it could be a time slip, it could be a replay of a moment in time, it could even be a lucid daydream or something, who knows? What we do know is that, like you said, it's an encapsulated moment of pure joy for a small child. And I think that's what is important about that story, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find it quite a heartwarming tale, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's a really sweet one.
Yeah, compared to some of the stories I've heard from hospitals, that's my hill, and I'm going to die on it, I think, in regards to that tale. Makes an unusual change for a hospital story not to be terrifying. Yeah, which is strangely the third one you have, as I said, made me chuckle when I saw it. Which I've kind of probably given you an insight to, which is this intriguing experience from Barnsley Hall Hospital in Bromsgrove, and obviously that made me laugh, having been born in Barnsley, and I always chuckle of that, but also I had to chuckle of the infamous name of the local village, which is one of those wonderful, brilliant English towns and villages that we have, of Licky End.
I know. Isn't it just fabulous?
Brilliant name.
Only in England could we think it was a good idea to call something Licky End.
Trouble is, it's not the worst named village in the country, is it?
No, not by far.
having been at a wedding in Chaton.
Oh God.
In the Peak District, Ruth, I can completely agree.
There's one somewhere called Ready Token.
Well,
it's hilarious.
We're spoilt in South Yorkshire. We've got Penistone, which makes you...
can be badly misread.
Yeah, it does cause eyebrows to people not from Yorkshire, I have to say, when they try and pronounce it, which is always funny. Just call it Penistone.
I like Walsbury in North Devon, which is not written how it's pronounced.
Yes,
yeah, you say Walsbury, but if you see it written down, it's Wolfardisworthy.
Yes, as I came a cropper a couple of years ago.
Yes. But yes, Licky End that wonderful?
Yes, but this one is quite different because this is a specialised hospital, as I say, that was set up for the nervous and mental diseases, which I would imagine we would consider to have become what was called a psychiatric hospital in the modern era before they all closed in the 80s and early 90s here in the UK.
Yeah, so this was one of those big psychiatric hospitals. Well, its name was the Barnsley Hall Hospital for Nervous and Mental Diseases, and it had a huge 324 acres site, mostly laid to, parkland sort of thing, not all buildings. But it opened for patients in 1907, spent a little bit of its time in the First World War as a military hospital, and then returned to be, used as a hospital for people with mental health issues, and was called the Worcestershire Mental Hospital, which again is a terrible name. Operated again during the Second World War for a little time as a military hospital, but once that was over, it became part of the National Health Service, which was obviously being set up, and that's when it became named as the Barnsley Hall Hospital for Nervous and Mental Disease. It was quite a big hospital, had 1,200 patients at its busiest point, but was finally closed down in 1996. So it stood derelict for a while, and sort of was held by the NHS, and some of the buildings were sort of, occasionally used for a meeting or whatever. But eventually they sold the land for residential development. And on that land, they then built what is now known locally as the Barnsley Hall Estate, housing estate. So all those houses are built on the grounds of this, hospital for mental health. And somebody had said to me that I ought to look into it because it was known locally for this whole estate to be a bit of a paranormal hotspot, which, is a bit like a red rag to a bull to Ruth and her databases. Let's get out there and see what we can find. So that's exactly what I did. I went out on social media to see if anybody knew anything about it. These will all be pseudonyms, by the way, but Marie got in touch with me and said that a friend of hers used to live on that estate for a while and saw the ghost of a soldier who just suddenly materialised in the hallway of her house as she was walking down the hallway. Suddenly there was the ghost of a soldier walking down it as well. Bearing in mind, of course, that the hospital had operated as a military hospital for two periods, First World War and Second World War. And because she was walking down her hallway as he appeared, before she had time to sort of react, she'd walked through him. I mean, that's just... Well, that would do your nut in for the rest of the day, wouldn't it? There I was, strolling down my own blooming hallway.
Yes.
Find myself walking through a ghost. Great.
Again.
And she went to... The same lady had gone to her fridge to get something one day, and you know how fridges can sometimes have the glass-fronted doors?
Yes.
Well, hers did. And as she went to open it, she could obviously see the room behind her reflected in front of her on the glass door, if you can imagine what I'm saying. And in that reflection, she could see behind her the window to her garden, and that same soldier was walking across her garden in the reflection in the glass doors of the fridge. So, of course, she sort of spun round to look, but he'd vanished. She actually moved house and went to a different estate. I can't say as I blame her. Then, interestingly, two other ladies got in touch with me and said that they were sure they'd seen what was the figure of a monk walking around the area, and they knew that it had been a hospital. They knew that's what the history was, but they had no idea that there's been any sort of monastic order or anything around there. But again, I come back to we tend to think of anything in a cloak type shape as a monk.
Yes.
In our history, which of course it might not have been. And actually, if you think about it, one of those First World War greatcoats seen vaguely, if it was belted at the waist, could be possibly mistaken, I suppose, if it was not too clear.
Absolutely.
Then a lady called Michelle got in touch with me and said that her aunt used to work there when it was actually a hospital still, and said that she hated it whenever she had to go down to the morgue. Not just because it obviously was a morgue, and I don't suppose anybody particularly likes going to a morgue, but that was the area of the building that had the most paranormal activity.
Yes.
But she didn't know too much more detail than that, unfortunately. She just knew that her aunt used to say that lots of weird things they couldn't explain happened down there. And then I had Jake, who wrote back to me and said, I had no idea about Barnsley Hall Hospital or hauntings before reading this, which was my request. I moved to Bromsgrove in 2020. I'm no psychic by any stretch, though one of my bloodlines does include Gladys Skelding, who was a well-known psychic in her day.
Yes.
So he says, at best, I would say that I can pick up on energy and very occasionally smells that shouldn't be there.
Oh, right.
But he used to do a Sunday courier shift, driving a little courier van around Licky End, snigger, and Marlbrook and Stourbridge Road.
Yes.
And he often finished his round on Barnsley Hall Road. And although it never had any actual deliveries on there, we'd just finish up travelling along there on his way home. And he says every time it would feel like his skin was crawling when he passed what was left of the main hospital, which was the main admin building. Ooh. And he never understood why he felt so creeped out about it, because he didn't realise what it used to be until he saw me asking about it and then Googled it. And he said he hadn't lived far from that road, once thought about going up it for a run. But again, he felt this sort of dark feeling as he ran along that part. So doesn't run there anymore. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say as well that quite a few people did respond and say they've never experienced anything odd there. I think it's important to give the balance that not everybody's going to experience something on that estate. But it does seem like there is a little bit of a hotspot on that estate where the hospital used to be.
Especially, I mean, people who run do tend to run through what us normal people, or us people who pull a muscle thinking about going for a run. Yeah. Even in my sportier days, it was the one thing I hated was running.
I have a perfectly good motorbike.
Yes.
What do I need running legs for?
So, if there was a ball involved or a stick of some description, I'd be interested in running. But if not, then I was like, oh God. And so they tend to run in some locations that normal people may think are a bit spooky or a bit strange, or would put the willies up normal people. And so for somebody who could probably run in darkened areas at strange times of the day and night, at strange times of the year, Ruth, for them to get that feeling to the point that they don't run there anymore, I think speaks volumes as well.
That's a very good point, actually, because you're absolutely right. It's a bit like I was saying earlier, I'm a paranormal investigator. I go out to all sorts of weird, wonderful, wacky places in the middle of the night, and I don't feel creeped out just by being outside in the dark or in the mist or the fog or the rain or the wind or anything else. I'm quite calm in places that other people who don't do it as often might feel just naturally spooked out by. And it must be the same for runners, mustn't it?
Yes.
And cyclists, to be fair, because I would imagine that very often they're having to do this outside of their working hours, which might mean very early in the morning or late in the evening, which might mean in the dark, in all sorts of weather. And I would imagine quite often they want to pick a circular route, which is going to take them down some probably slightly unsavoury areas. Yeah. And they're probably used to that, and don't feel creeped out at all normally. So otherwise they wouldn't do it at all, would they?
No.
So to have one location that spooks them out enough to avoid it, like you say, I think that does speak volume.
I suppose as well, you have to be on high alert as a cyclist or a runner, Ruth, because you have to be aware that the surroundings around you are very changeable, because somebody could just run out in front of you, somebody could cut you up, somebody could take a turning and not signal. And so you would suggest that perhaps cyclists and runners are more aware of their surroundings than normal pedestrians, perhaps, or car drivers or motorcyclists, because they're not as... or rather, they don't have to be as aware of their surroundings as perhaps a runner or a cyclist does in those regards, because they tend to, as statistics would suggest, do tend to be in accidents more than a standard pedestrian would.
Yes, and it is a vulnerable position to be in, either running or cycling, isn't it? It's there are some inherent dangers to it, so they're going to have to be somewhat aware of their circumstances. Although I do see a fair number of people running with earbuds in.
Yes.
And I did see one the other day who merrily ran across the road without ever checking over his shoulder as to whether there was anything coming. And with his earbuds in, he wouldn't have heard anything. So sometimes they seem to be less aware than you would like, but
Yes, very true, very true. But then again, sometimes, the average pedestrian can walk into a bollard or a road sign because they're not paying attention.
Yes, true. I'm chuckling because I thought of it made me think of I have mobility issues, and so I walk with sticks or crutches. And I was walking my dogs in a wood a couple of years back, and I can't walk very fast, so I tend to walk a bit, sit on something, walk for a bit, lean on something, And there was this handy-looking log, so I walked up to it. I sort of tested it with my hands to make sure it was, not rotten or anything and firm, and it was. So I sat down on it. And have you ever seen those YouTube videos of the turtles on the rolling logs in a pond?
Yes.
Well, it was just like that. I sat on it, and this log gracefully rolled backwards, taking me with it. I ended up laying on this forest floor with the dogs looking at me like I was some kind of blithering idiot. Well, I thought, now how am I going to get myself back upright? And I just lay there on the floor, on my back, laughing my head off, because all I could think of was those turtles on those logs. Oh my God, I'm going to have to find a way to get myself upright, because I am not phoning the firemen to come and laugh at me. Honest, I'm not safe to be let out on my own.
No, you're not. But then we wouldn't have such amusing anecdotes from you every time we catch up.
That's true.
So, obviously, you're preparing the final draft of the latest book. So, when are you hoping to have this one available, Ruth? Is it imminent, really? By the time this out, it'll be available?
It could well be. I'm hoping to have it out in time for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm right on the last knockings of editing. And then I've just got to change the format size, because Amazon has to have a particular format size. But that's sort of a day's work. And then I've just got to choose the cover, really, which is always a lot harder than you'd think.
Yes.
Because I've ended up with a sort of theme is too strong a word, but if you look at my book covers, you can tell they're mine.
Yes, absolutely.
They have a look about them, don't they?
Yes, they have a distinct identity of their own.
Yes, so I have to find a picture that matches along with that identity that I like, but at the same time will work when you put the wording of the book overlaid over the picture.
Yes.
Because you can often choose a picture and think that's brilliant, and then when you go to try and put the words over it just won't work, because you've got to have a picture that has sufficient dark area, or at least non-busy area, where the words will stand out against the background, so you can see the title and the author.
Yeah.
So that'll take me about 2 days of umming and ahhing. And about 30 seconds to put the words on.
Brilliant. Fabulous. Well, before I let you go, we've got one other story, haven't we?
We have.
And so where do you get this one from? This sounds very interesting.
Well, it's a very interesting one, because a certain person I know quite well might have sent it to me, Mr. Bestall.
Absolutely. I thought as soon as they told me it, I thought, this is right up your street.
I love this story. I just love it in its evocative beauty and total simplicity, but utter bafflement.
Yes.
It sort of encapsulates everything about the paranormal that I love in one short story.
Yes.
It's broad daylight. The person is not doing anything to do with the paranormal at the time. They're not thinking about ghosts. They're not on a ghost hunt. They're not in a spooky place. They're just going about a nice day, and then this happens. So would you like me to tell it, or would you like to tell it?
I'll let you tell it. It sounds better the way you describe it.
So a very nice chap I know called Mr. Paul Bestall wrote to me to say, and this came from a friend of yours.
Yes.
So this was in 2018, and your friend was decided that he'd have a little getaway. nice summer weather that year, towards the end of the sort of summer weather. So he decided to go off into the Peak District and just have a couple of days away, enjoying nature, hiking around a bit. So he'd set his tent up in a nice sort of remote area, nice and isolated. And at the point that this happened, he'd been camped there for a couple of days already, sort of walking around during the day, chilling out, just enjoying the views, enjoying his own company, enjoying the lovely weather. So he comes to his final morning. He's got to pack the tent up that morning. So he wakes up, unzips the front of the tent, makes himself a cup of coffee, and sits, so he's half inside the tent with his legs sticking out of the unzipped door, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And he's having his coffee and he's smoking a cigarette, just looking at the beautiful views, and he can see purple heather blooming across the moorland in front of him. It was a warm morning, really pretty. And as he sat there, he sees a fox dashing about and darting up the hillside, running vaguely towards him. Not terribly far away from where he was sitting, maybe only 200 metres or so at this point. And he knows that the fox hasn't spotted him because of the way he's sitting hidden inside his tent with just his legs sticking out. So he sort of keeps very still, watches this fox, and it's sort of running about, sniffing, having a look, and it makes its way up the small hill that his tent is on. And it's running towards a rocky outcrop that's next to a bit of fencing. By the time it gets to that, it's practically parallel to where he's sitting in his tent watching it. As it gets to this bit of the fence, the fox turns round and looks directly at him as he's sitting there in his tent. So for just that moment, they have that little bit of connection. And then the fox kind of settles on its haunches to make the leap over the fence. You know, the way dogs and felines and what have you, they kind of settle back before they make a jump.
Yeah.
So he watches it do this, and it makes the jump over this bit of stone prop and fence. And as it gets to the top of its jump, so it's sailing beautifully over this bit of fence, looking amazing, it blinks out of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And your friend says he literally spat his coffee out in shock. Because nothing up until that point had seemed even vaguely weird, paranormal, anything. There was no weird feeling. It was a lovely morning. It's perfectly normal if you sit still to see a fox running about, especially out there. The only slightly odd thing was that the fox had turned to look at him just before it jumped.
Yes.
But perhaps he made a slight noise or something, you would think.
Yeah.
But then it makes the jump, and at the apex of its jump, in midair, it just blinks out of existence. It was only about 100 metres away from him. He got up, good paranormal investigator.
Yes.
Walks over and takes a good look to see if there was some kind of optical illusion or whatever that meant that actually the fox had appeared to disappear but had actually just gone behind something or whatever. Nothing. It was exactly as he thought it looked like from where he'd been sitting. It was just a rocky outcrop with a bit of a wooden fence on it, and the fox was in clear, open space as it jumped over that. So he should have seen it complete its jump, as it were. Mm-hmm. And he didn't. The fox just disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that struck me about that was the fact that he wasn't scared by it at all. He found it a magical experience, Ruth. He really, he felt privileged to have witnessed it. And he's not closed off to the unusual or the supernatural, but he's not a big devourer of paranormal information or books or anything. But he's open-minded enough to consider the possibilities of things outside of our wheelhouses, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that's what struck me, because he's a very down-to-earth fella, and he was just, when he told the story, he was smiling about it.
Yeah.
But also I think he knew that I would be completely non-judgmental in regards to what he was telling me about it. And I just said, well, that just sounds like it was an amazing experience for you. And he said it was. It was. I wish I could have it again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you describe him smiling as he told it. I was smiling as I wrote it out because, of course, obviously, part of my job as an author is to not add anything to the substance of the story, but to write it in a logical sequence.
Yes.
And to describe what the person is seeing in a way to make the reader visualise it. So that's my role as an author, to add nothing to the experience and take nothing away from it, but put it in a logical, descriptive order. So as I was doing that, it was making me smile because it feels like a beautiful experience. You can just picture yourself in that warm sunshine, peaceful in that tent, smoking a cigarette, which I'm not allowed to do anymore because I've given up, and that would have been really nice. And that amazing moment when just something freaky suddenly happens, but at the same time, weirdly cheeky by the way it looks back at you and then goes, "Look what I can do."
Yeah. He was convinced it deliberately looked at him.
It feels like it, the way he describes the story,
Yeah, because he says, I could see it for ages, and it must have known, because it's a fox, it would have smelt him. He says he's not that daft. And he didn't. I didn't ask him about the wind direction, but I'm not sure you would notice those kind of things anyway. And usually there would be very little noticeable breeze for a human, I would imagine, which is one of the things why animals are very adept at picking up scents, because they've got further heightened senses. And so he was absolutely convinced that it knew he was there all the time and wanted to make sure he was watching. That was the overall impression he had.
I can understand that, because I've spent a lot of time out in the countryside over the years, and I have sat in the edge of a woodland looking out over a field once with my two dogs laying down in the grass beside me, and I watched a hare pop out onto the short grass on the edge of a field and sit there, and it saw two ladies walking two spaniels coming up the field, so it froze in spot and just kind of shrunk in on itself a bit and kept completely still. And those two ladies with their two dogs walked past both the hare and me and my two dogs without seeing any of us because we all just kept still.
Yes.
You know, so humans are usually much less aware of their surroundings than animals are. And like you say, I mean, that fox quite probably did know he was there. Mind you, I have seen two fox cubs once tumble out of a hedge, prey fighting, right in front of my two dogs, and then look completely.
Yeah.
So they're not always aware, but with this particular story, it has the sense of, look at me showing off in the sunshine, look at me with my lovely bushy tail. Are you looking at me? Now watch what I can do.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, in Chinese, I do mean Chinese, not Japanese. Yeah, Chinese legend. You know, they have the fox spirit, don't they? The nine-tailed fox spirit. And you know, the character of that is a cheeky, show-off, elemental spirit.
Japanese mythology, the fox is the same as well. It's tricky, it's clever, it's a trickster.
Yeah, enjoys having fun.
Yeah.
This story strikes me slightly fey in a way.
Yes.
You know.
When I mean, because when he explained it and kind of clarified it, when he told me at the time, I would have said it's a ghost. Now, with the people I've spoken to and what I've read and what I've learned and what I've opened my mind up to, I'm not so sure anymore. Because there seems to be a level of intelligence to it that you wouldn't normally prescribe to a ghost, if that makes sense. Even though there are numerous thousands of encounters where people claim to have encountered a spirit of some description that seems to be aware that they're being watched, or they interact with them somehow.
Yeah, or communicates.
Yeah. Whereas this seems slightly different to me. There's something, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something not quite of this realm about it.
I think it's because it's in the warm morning sunshine. That fox, when you talk about somebody seeing a spirit or a ghost and communicating with them, and there's a level of intelligence to that entity, whatever that is, they're usually talking about something which is clearly out of place.
Yes.
You know, it's a First World War soldier, or it's a monk, or it's a lady in a long dress, or it's their grandmother that died 3 years ago. Whatever it is, it's out of place and out of time. This fox is in place and in time.
Yep.
And it would be entirely normal to sit there and watch a fox play in the sun.
Yep.
While you sat quietly in a tent. There is nothing unusual about that or in any way out of this world until the fox turns to look at him and then jumps and disappears.
Yes.
And at that moment, you're suddenly out of normality and into paranormality, if you like.
Yeah.
And I love that story.
Oh, well, I'm glad I sent it down to you. Because
keep them coming.
I'll see what I can do. But yes, it was just a very heartwarming story, and I thought you'd love that one. So
I do. Because it just, like I said at the start, it encapsulates everything I love about the paranormal.
Yes.
So often when I put, what I call my ghost posts out, asking for people's experiences in a particular location, you can imagine I get quite a lot of internet troll response. And I've heard almost every joke about ghosts you can possibly imagine.
Yeah. Especially
when I ask about a pub ghost, and I get 6 people responding, there's loads of spirits behind that bar. Shut up. I haven't heard that a million times. But this sort of assumption that the paranormal is only going to happen at night in a spooky castle or a spooky ruined abbey or whatever,
yes,
is so utterly blown out of the water by all of my now 10 books, as this will be.
Yes.
Which has account after account after account after account that is in broad daylight, in an ordinary location, in people's cars, houses, shops, pubs, playgrounds, fields, roads, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's wherever it chooses to happen. And if you're lucky enough to see it, it changes your worldview. Because even if you tuck it away in your mind and think, I can't categorise that, so I'm not going to, which I know a lot of people do,
yeah,
you are still nevertheless left with, I might have this worldview, but that one thing does not fit. Now where am I?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's, the key about the paranormal. It does not fit.
Precisely.
And once you've seen it, heard it, smelt it, whatever it might be, you can't look away from that. You're left with, damn it. What the heck was that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this box is perfect. Like, damn it, what the heck was it doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect way for me to let you return to your editing and collating, Ruth. So,
that's joy.
So, my love, for anybody who wants to track you down, get copies of your forthcoming book, your previous releases, and keep up to date with everything, where's the best place to find you?
So all my books, the easiest place to find them is Amazon, and they're available in paperback, downloadable, or to listen for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. One of them is in audiobook and others will follow. You can get them from all sorts of other online book retailers, and you can also get your library to order them in. So various ways of getting hold of them. If you want to get hold of me, the simplest way is through my email, which is simply Ruth Roper Wylde, no spaces or anything, just Ruth Roper Wylde @gmail.com. But I'm also on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Thread, Instagram. So you can find me on all of those as well.
Fabulous. Well, I'll put links to everything as always in the show notes for everybody to track you down. And I want to say thank you again for your time, your conversation, and always a pleasure. And I look forward to the next time.
It'll be great. Thank you so much for having me again.
Pleasure.